Hi, thank you. So it's my third time here at the conference, and I'm super excited. It has a special place in my heart already because, yeah, it's my hometown, so always coming home here. And the second part is organized by CoStack, and CoStack is the company that actually enabled me to start React Native a couple years ago. So I'm really say thank you again. So if you want to contact me later on, you can hit me up on GitHub, Twitter, or Discord at Radko93. But basically, I'm a React Native developer and open source contributor for a couple of years now. And 3 years ago, I also started working remotely. So I don't go to any offices lately. And I switched to working completely remote. And since my biggest passion is actually traveling, I try to combine those two. So far, since 2 years, I've been traveling and working from different places. And I lived in more than 10 countries. So it's been amazing. So if you want to chat about remote companies, full remote companies, remote work, or just traveling, also hit me at the after party. It will be cool. But since our today's topic is TypeScript, I just want to share my journey with TypeScript. 1 year ago, I was complete newbie in TypeScript. I barely knew something about it. I never actually tried it in production. But my colleagues at work convinced the team that we should start using TypeScript for a new module. And we did, and eventually we rewrote everything in TypeScript. And so I just want to share my experience with you from like a regular developer perspective. So just the side we see working every day. So the basic intro, what TypeScript is it builds on the JavaScript foundation by adding optional static types. And then these types are being checked by the TypeScript compiler, and then he can show us some errors, common errors, which have like passing wrong arguments to the function, or misspelling something like the last talk, or like the basic errors, or also more complex error. The more types we have, the more complex protection we have, basically. So what's good about TypeScript? So the first thing is it's so easy to start with. So basically, if you don't have any types, but you still know JavaScript, you can start, and then gradually you can start adding types. So if you ever seen flow types, this is exactly the same shown on the screen now. So if you want to just start very simple, adding prop types in TypeScript, you can also do that. That's why I think it was so easy for me to start with. There's just little barrier to get started. And I think it's great for big projects, especially because if you have big code bases and it's a lot of people working, cooperating, have to rewrite legacy code bases, it's very important to have, so you know what to expect as a return value of your module, and you know what's the input. So you actually, it's much easier for you to rewrite your module, or if you want to refactor something, or you want to jump in someone else's code you've never seen. So I think for me it was much improvement in terms of readability. And now TypeScript allows you to use JS code. So for example, if your company has some legacy code you cannot convert because maybe some other apps use it and you don't want to touch it, then you can either add typings for it, or you can add JS docs, and now TypeScript can parse JS doc comments and add types from these comments, so you can then use this JS code straight away in your TypeScript app. And it's configurable. You can disable some rules. You can make it less strict, more strict. So that's also a big plus. And the last thing, and not least, is that he has a now big and very active community, and that I think that's very important now. And one of the biggest things and the best things about TypeScript that the core is expanding and it's improving, but also the community, the people adding types for library definitions. I think that's progressing a lot, and we'll see even more in the future. And now I want to share a couple of things that I see every day in Visual Studio Code, which has first-class support for TypeScript, and we'll share a couple of things that I liked a lot, so maybe you're gonna like it as well. So the auto-completion and cohints, if you ever used static language like Java or Objective-C or anything like that, you know that it's so easy. You're gonna import some third-party module or library to your file, and then you get suggestions what you're gonna do with it. And it's so much easier than jumping over to the computation all the time and maybe remember what the function name was. So I just found it's much faster, and you always know that you're safe. And you get instant feedback about errors in your code. So whether you misspell something, or whether you're passing wrong arguments, or you try to access a property or maybe undefined value, you already know about it. So you can save yourself from like runtime errors, or maybe you would discover the same in tests, but you know you have to write the tests, and then afterwards you have to fix the code back. So it's just faster to do it before. So another thing that makes my life much easier is it's much easier to navigate with the code base now. So you can just jump through the code base, jump to components imported, or jump to some library definitions, typings. And this also makes my life much easier now. You can just pick definition. You want to check types from a component. So that's very intuitive. And Visual Studio Code now handles imports automatically. So now just start writing a code, and it will auto-suggest any imports you're gonna missing for this file. So that's also great. And that's an example of things I discovered, I don't know, 2 months ago, but I really like it, and it shows the simplicity of TypeScript and how it can help you. So that's like a basic React app. So first we define the profile state with a name. Then we add the definition to the global app state we have for all our states. And then later on we have a component, and we connect it with Radek regular, and we have the select function. And in the last line we have a return type, which is a utility from TypeScript that extracts the return value for a function. And this way we can extract the return value of select and pass it as a props, and just make our props from the select function directly. And this way we can save ourselves making our prop types manually again, which I didn't like to do. And we have the same type coming all the way from the reducer type to the component. So we don't have to worry if it's the same type. You don't have to, if we refactor our component or refactor our reducer, you don't have to worry about if something changed, and we have to adapt it to the component again. So if you want linter to the code base after changing reducer, we don't have to think about it anymore. What's not that great about TypeScript? So of course there are some disadvantages. So overhead might be too big for some small projects. Maybe if you're working alone, and maybe you're working on a proof of concept app, or just something super simple for a showcase, then maybe it doesn't make sense to add too much types. But I found that it helps even for the small apps in the end. And it takes a lot of time to migrate big projects. So I guess for some people it might be impossible to migrate all the company code, or it just doesn't make sense to waste so much time. And for me, the biggest pain point right now is some errors, and I have very complex types. And then you combine it with third-party libraries. You pass components around that are wrapped with something else. Sometimes the types that error message are so complex that it takes you hours to figure out what's actually going on. And for me, in the beginning, it was quite hard to figure out what's going on exactly. And of course, it's an additional step in a pipeline. So you have to install TypeScript, then maintain the version, then update it, then connect with ESLint, and with Preacher, with Jest, and all the tools. So it's just another thing you had to spend time on maintaining your project. So of course, that's a disadvantage. So the obvious comparison is to compare Flow with TypeScript, because it kind of has similar use cases. And I tried to think about what's good in Flow and what's bad in comparison to TypeScript. And I think the pros in comparison to TypeScript are for Flow that it has better support for React in the end, and it has official support for React Native, because React Native still doesn't have official support for TypeScript. It's just a community version that people contribute. And it's stored in definitely type repo, and it happens that it's outdated compared to the official, to the actual React Native code. And if for a pre-release version, you don't always get the typing, so you have to wait. So it's not the perfect situation right now. And also, I think it's easier to integrate than TypeScript, because it's just type checking system, and you can install it and also use it straight away. And I think in some use cases, it's easier to get more coverage than in TypeScript in a shorter time. I think Flow is a bit better in inferring types because in my experiences, TypeScript had usually inferred types to any, which is for function arguments, and Flow checks that more deeply in the beginning, even if you don't add too many annotations at the beginning. So it's just easier to start and get more type coverage with Flow in the beginning, at least. And some cons of TypeScript in Flow, some cons of Flow in comparison to TypeScript. So I think it lacks types coverage in comparison to TypeScript, and for example, in libraries that are not strictly related to Facebook, because Facebook, of course, use it a lot, but third-party libraries don't concentrate too much on the Flow, and people don't contribute too much. That's also the community that's doing it for TypeScript. And I think there are a lot of breaking changes while upgrading. When I used to use Flow, and it was like, when you're upgrading your React Native, you had to upgrade Flow. So every time there were a lot of errors I had to fix, and a lot of third-party libraries weren't fixed for that, and had to tweak them or comment it out. So I remember just bad memories for the time. And some of the syntax of Flow I don't like. Like in this example, in TypeScript, you can just import type as any other module, and in Flow, you have to use the import type syntax. And when you want to decide you want to start with React Native and TypeScript, so it's very simple now with our community template TypeScript. And then you want to add TypeScript slint. Before we used to use TSLint, but now it's going to be deprecated this year. So I think it's a good decision to integrate TypeScript and slint together. That's why you can already start using it, this library. And then in the end, you can use the package script for linting your TS code. So we actually use TypeScript compiler with no output to check all your type coverage in your app, because VS Code doesn't check all your files, just the files you opened. So this way you can also check the code on CI or just on your local machine if you want to. But what if you don't want to start a new project, but want to migrate to TypeScript? So that's when it gets harder. So it depends on your code bases. But we were lucky because we had our app in modules. So we had the business logic separate and our app in a separate module. So we could do it gradually. But I think in the end, like, the best solution is Blitzkrieg, and it's a term used by historians to. It means that it's a fast war, instant war. So as fast as you can, you have to rewrite your app in TypeScript, because handling two type systems at the time might be confusing or hard. So that's why I think there are tools that will help you migrate to TypeScript. And it might be quite smooth. Of course, there will be some errors, but after, I think, a couple of days, you're going to figure it out and complete your transitions. And to answer the question from the title of the presentation, is TypeScript going to be our future? So I think it might be for some companies. I think the power of TypeScript is now the community and the tooling, as I tried to show in this talk. The community is moving fast, and that's why there's a lot of typings for all the libraries you might use. That's very helpful, and the tooling helps you work day by day with your code. So for big code bases and bigger companies, it's helpful, and I very agree with this suite. And thank you.